A desperate cry pierces the howling blizzard on the Llano Estacado, pulling Eliza Harper, a widow scarred by loss, into the frozen night of 1875. Haunted by the death of her husband and son, she faces a choice that could unravel her hatred or cost her life. What she finds in the snow, a Comanche child and a chilling mystery, will lead to an encounter that defies all expectations. Will courage triumph over fear, or will the past ignite a deadly clash? Subscribe now to uncover the full story and share where you're listening from. Can one act of compassion bridge two worlds? Stay tuned to find out. The blizzard roared across the Llano Estacado as the sun bled red against the horizon, its last light swallowed by a tide of iron-gray clouds. It was 1875, and the Texas High Plains stretched endlessly and unforgiving, a land where hope could freeze as quickly as flesh. Eliza Harper, a woman in her 30s with eyes hardened by grief, wrestled with the warped door of an abandoned trading post. 2 years ago, a Comanche raid had stolen her husband and son, leaving her heart a scorched patch of earth. She lived alone now, her only companions the creak of weathered boards and the ghosts that whispered in the dark. The wind screamed, clawing at the post's sagging walls, rattling the single window like a trapped beast. Eliza jammed a splintered plank against the door, her calloused hand steady despite the cold biting through her wool shawl. The fire in the iron stove sputtered, casting jagged shadows across the dirt floor. She knew this storm was no ordinary squall. The air carried a weight, sharp and heavy, as if the sky itself were collapsing under its own fury. Snow lashed the walls in waves, each gust a hammer blow that shook the timbers. She checked the door's latch, her breath clouding in the dim light of a single oil lamp. Inside, the world was small. 4 walls, a low ceiling, a table scarred by years of trade. Outside, the prairie was a void, its edges erased by swirling white. Eliza had seen winters here before, but none like this. The cold sank into her bones, deeper than the ache of loss she carried. She tossed another log into the stove, sparks flaring like fleeting stars. The flames offered warmth, but no comfort. Her husband's old cavalry coat hung on a peg, its faded blue a reminder of a life torn away. She turned from it, refusing memory's pull. Then, through the storm's howl, a sound cut through. A faint, high wail, sharp as a blade. Eliza froze, her pulse hammering. The wind often played tricks, twisting groans of timber or the snap of frozen branches into something human. But this was different. A cry too raw, too desperate to be anything but real. She pressed her ear to the door, the wood cold against her cheek. There it was again, thin and wavering, like a thread stretched to breaking. A child's cry, out there in the blizzard's jaws. Her first thought was impossibility. No one could survive this storm, not a grown man, let alone a child. The nearest settlement was miles away, and the Comanche camp, closer but no less dangerous, was a place she'd sworn never to approach. Fear coiled in her gut, whispering of raiders, of blood-soaked nights. Yet the cry came again, insistent, tugging at something deeper than her dread. She thought of her son, his small hands clutching her sleeve, his voice silenced forever. The memory burned, and with it, a reckless resolve. Eliza grabbed the lamp, its flame dancing wildly, and pulled her husband's coat from the peg. The wool smelled of dust and time, heavy as guilt. She wrapped a scarf around her face, the fabric stiff with frost, and checked the knife at her belt, her only defense if this was a trap. The cry pierced the night again, fainter now, as if the child's strength were fading. She couldn't wait. With a grunt, she shoved the door open, the wind slamming into her like a fist. Snow stung her eyes, blurring the world into a white roar. She stepped into the gale, the lamp's glow a feeble shield against the dark. Each step sank deep, the snow dragging at her boots. The cold was a living thing, clawing through her layers, numbing her fingers inside thick gloves. The cry came from the east, near the broken fence that marked the edge of the post's land. She leaned into the wind, one hand shielding the lamp, the other gripping the knife's hilt. The prairie was a graveyard tonight, its bones hidden under drifts, its voice the scream of the storm. Then she saw it, a glint of steel at the base of the doorframe, half buried in snow. Her heart lurched. She knelt, brushing the powder aside, and found a Comanche dagger, its blade driven deep into the wood. The handle was wrapped in rawhide, adorned with a single bead, red as blood. A warning? A marker? Her mind raced, conjuring images of warriors waiting in the dark, their eyes glinting like wolves. The cry came again, weaker, pulling her forward despite the fear clawing her chest. She tightened her grip on the lamp and stepped into the blizzard, the dagger's shadow lingering like a question without an answer. The storm's wail chased Eliza Harper as she plunged deeper into the Llano Estacado's frozen night, the Comanche dagger's glint still burning in her mind. Each step through the snow was a fight, her boots sinking into drifts that swallowed her calves. The lamp flickered, its frail light barely piercing the blizzard's white wall. The child's cry, faint but relentless, pulled her eastward toward the broken fence, a splintered relic of the trading post's better days. Her heart thudded, torn between the instinct to turn back and the memory of her son's small, lifeless hand. The Texas plains offered no mercy, and neither did her past. But that cry was a tether she couldn't cut. The wind howled like a pack of coyotes, stinging her face through the scarf. Her fingers, numb inside thick gloves, clung to the knife at her belt, its weight a cold comfort. The prairie stretched into nothingness, a graveyard of snow and shadow where even the stars hid. She squinted through the swirling flakes, the lamp casting wild patterns across the ground. The cry grew sharper, closer, guiding her past the fence's jagged posts. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts, steaming in the air. Every step felt like a gamble, the dagger's presence whispering of danger. Comanche warriors could be watching, their silhouettes masked by the storm. She stumbled over a hidden root, the lamp nearly slipping from her grasp. Cursing under her breath, she steadied herself, the cry now so near it seemed to vibrate in her chest. There, against a drift near the fence, a dark shape lay half buried in snow. Eliza dropped to her knees, the cold seeping through her skirts, and brushed away the powder. A travois, its wooden frame cracked, lay toppled, the horse long gone. Wrapped in a deerskin blanket, a Comanche baby girl whimpered, her tiny face pale, lips tinged blue. Her cries were weak, like the last sparks of a dying fire. Eliza's breath caught, her mind flashing to the raid 2 years back, flames, screams, and her son's blood on the dirt. This child, wrapped in beads and hide, was one of them. Hatred flared, urging her to leave the girl to the storm. But those dark eyes, wide and pleading, mirrored her son's in his final moments. The knife at her belt felt heavier, useless against the ache in her chest. She couldn't leave this life to fade, not when she'd failed her own. With trembling hands, she scooped the baby into her arms, pressing the icy bundle against her coat. The return to the trading post was a battle against the gale. Snow blinded her, the lamp's glow fading to a pinprick. She hunched over the child, shielding her from the wind's teeth. Her legs burned, each step a slog through deepening drifts. The post's outline emerged like a ghost through the storm, its sagging roof a promise of shelter. Eliza kicked the door open, the wind slamming it against the wall. She stumbled inside, the warmth of the stove hitting her like a wave. The baby's whimpers softened, but her tiny body was still cold as death. Eliza knelt by the stove, peeling back the frozen deerskin. The blanket was heavy, adorned with red and turquoise beads that gleamed in the firelight. As she unwrapped it, a small leather scrap fell to the floor, etched with a symbol, a circle pierced by 3 lines, identical to the mark on the dagger outside. Her blood ran cold. Was this a trap? A lure left by warriors to draw her out? Or had the storm scattered a family, leaving this child as its only survivor? The symbol's mystery gnawed at her, but the baby's shallow breaths demanded action. She grabbed her husband's old cavalry coat from the floor, its frayed hem stiff with frost, and tore it into strips. The fabric smelled of gunpowder and regret, but it burned well, feeding the stove's hungry flames. Eliza warmed her hands, then rubbed the baby's tiny limbs, coaxing life back into her. She found a tin of goat's milk, diluted it with melted snow, and dripped it into the child's mouth with a spoon. The girl's eyes fluttered, dark as a prairie night, and Eliza felt a pang, part fear, part something softer she couldn't name. The storm raged on, sealing them in a world of white. Eliza sat by the fire, the baby cradled against her chest, her mind a tangle of questions. The dagger and the symbol hinted at something larger, a story she couldn't read. Had the child been abandoned deliberately, or lost in chaos? Were warriors even now tracking her, their horses muffled by snow? The thought tightened her grip on the knife, still close at hand. Yet the baby's warmth, fragile but steady, anchored her. She hummed a low tune, one her son once loved, and the sound felt like defiance against the storm and the shadows it carried. The baby's soft hum, echoing the tune Eliza Harper had sung, lingered in the air as the Llano Estacado storm battered the trading post. The fire's glow cast fleeting warmth across the room, but the weight of the Comanche dagger and the mysterious symbol on the leather scrap pressed heavier on her mind. For 2 days, the blizzard sealed them in a cocoon of snow and shadow, the world outside reduced to a relentless howl. Eliza sat by the stove, the child cradled against her shoulder, her thoughts a tangle of fear and duty. The Texas plains of 1875 were no place for mercy, yet here she was, tethered to a life she hadn't chosen to save. The walls groaned under the wind's assault, each creak a reminder of the post's fragility. Snow piled high against the door, turning the single window into a frosted sheet that dulled the gray light of day. Eliza's eyes darted to the knife on the table, its blade a cold promise of trouble. The symbol, 3 lines slicing a circle, haunted her. Was it a warrior's mark, a call to vengeance, or something else, lost to the storm's chaos? She pushed the thought down, focusing on the baby's shallow breaths. The girl's tiny chest rose and fell, her warmth a fragile defiance against the cold that seeped through the cracks. Eliza moved with purpose, her boots scuffing the dirt floor. She melted snow in a dented tin pot, mixing it with goat's milk to feed the child drop by drop. The baby's lips, no longer blue, closed around the spoon, her dark eyes flickering with faint trust. Each swallow felt like a small victory, but the storm's roar kept Eliza's nerves taut. She wrapped the child in a quilt, its faded patches a relic of her own lost family, and checked the stove. The fire devoured the last of her husband's torn coat, its embers spitting like whispered curses. Wood was scarce now, each log a lifeline she couldn't squander. The hours dragged, marked only by the wind's relentless cadence. Eliza's mind wandered to the raid that had shattered her life. Flames licking the night, her son's cries drowned by hoofbeats. Yet amid that chaos, a memory surfaced. A young Comanche warrior, his face streaked with war paint, pausing to cradle a child before vanishing into the dark. The baby's eyes, now watching her, carried that same depth, a quiet spark that stirred something in Eliza's chest. Was this girl his kin? The thought softened her hatred, but the dagger's shadow loomed, warning her that trust was a dangerous bet on these plains. She paced the small room, the baby's weight grounding her. The storm's howl mimicked hoofbeats, each gust tightening her grip on the knife. She imagined warriors circling the post, their forms blurred by snow, drawn by the child or the mark she'd found. If you're gripped by this tale of survival and mystery, consider subscribing to follow Eliza's journey. It's your support that keeps these stories alive, and I'd love to know where you're listening from. The thought of listeners out there, sharing this moment, felt like a spark in the dark, much like the fire she tended now. By the second day, the storm's fury hadn't waned. Eliza's hands trembled as she cleaned the baby's face with a damp cloth, the act steadying her fraying nerves. The child cooed softly, a sound that cut through the wind's scream like a blade through hide. Eliza studied the leather scrap again, tracing the symbol's lines with her finger. It wasn't just a mark. It was deliberate, etched with care. A message, perhaps, or a claim. Her gut twisted. Had the child been left as bait, a trap to lure her into the open? Or was she the only thing standing between this girl and the prairie's merciless grip? Night fell, heavy and black, the lamp's flicker barely holding the darkness at bay. Eliza sat by the stove, the baby asleep in her arms, her mind replaying the warrior's face from years ago. His eyes had held no malice, only urgency, as he'd spared a life amid chaos. Could this child bridge that moment to now, or was she a pawn in a larger game? The dagger, still on the table, gleamed like a challenge. Eliza's fingers brushed the quilt, then the baby's warm cheek. Whatever the symbol meant, whatever danger waited beyond the storm, she'd made her choice. The plains might take everything, but not this child. Not while she still had breath to fight for her. Eliza Harper's resolve burned as fiercely as the stove's embers. Her choice to protect the Comanche child a quiet rebellion against the Llano Estacado's merciless cold. The storm's grip loosened by the third morning of 1875, the wind's howl fading to a low moan. Eliza stood at the trading post's frost-crusted window, the baby asleep in her quilted cradle, and peered into a world reborn in blinding white. The Texas plains stretched unbroken, a sea of snow glinting under a pale, icy sun. No tracks marred the surface, no shadows moved, but a faint smudge on the horizon, a wisp of smoke curling skyward, set her pulse racing. Someone was out there, and they were coming. She stepped back, her boots scuffing the dirt floor, and checked the child. The girl's breaths were steady now, her cheeks flushed with warmth. Eliza's fingers brushed the leather scrap tucked in the quilt, its three-lined circle a riddle she couldn't shake. The dagger on the table gleamed, its red bead catching the light like a drop of blood. She'd faced the storm to save this child, but the smoke signaled a new test, one she couldn't outrun. Her hand hovered over her rifle, propped against the wall, its barrel cold as the fear in her gut. The Comanche were swift, their horses ghosts on the plains. If they came, would they see her as a savior or a thief? Eliza moved to the door, easing it open a crack. The air bit her face, sharp and clean, carrying the faint scent of burning wood. The smoke was no trick of the light. 3 thin columns rose from beyond the low hills, steady as a heartbeat. Her breath clouded, mingling with the chill. She scanned the horizon, the snow's glare stinging her eyes. Nothing moved, but the silence was heavy, like the pause before a rifle's crack. She shut the door, latching it tight, and turned to the stove. The fire needed tending, but her woodpile was dwindling, each log a precious shield against the cold. She knelt by the baby, adjusting the quilt. The child stirred, her dark eyes opening briefly, calm and untroubled. Eliza's chest tightened. She'd saved this girl, fed her, warmed her, but the smoke meant her people were near. The memory of the raid flashed, hoofbeats, screams, her son's lifeless weight. But so did the warrior who'd spared a child. Could that man be among those coming? She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the present. She melted more snow, warmed milk, and fed the girl, each act grounding her against the dread creeping up her spine. By midday, the smoke columns thickened, darker now, spreading like ink across the sky. Eliza's hands shook as she cleaned the rifle, its metal cold under her fingers. She loaded it with practiced care, the click of each cartridge a small defiance. The baby cooed, her tiny voice a stark contrast to the storm's fading echo. Eliza glanced at the leather scrap again, its symbol taunting her. Was it a marker of kinship, a claim to this child, or a warning tied to the dagger's blade? Her mind spun, conjuring images of warriors emerging from the snow, their eyes hard with suspicion. She stepped outside, the snow crunching under her boots. The cold was brutal, but the sky was clear, a brittle blue that made the smoke stand out sharper. She shaded her eyes, squinting toward the hills. A faint rhythm pulsed through the ground, not wind, but something alive. Hoofbeats, distant, but growing. Her heart lurched. She hurried back inside, barring the door, and lifted the baby from her cradle. The girl's warmth steadied her, but the rifle stayed close, its stock worn smooth by years of vigilance. The smoke meant a camp, likely dozens of riders. If they came, she'd face them, but the terms would be theirs. Afternoon light slanted through the window, painting the room in gold and shadow. Eliza sat by the stove, the baby in her lap, and listened. The hoofbeats grew louder, a low thunder rolling across the plains. She imagined the riders, blankets bright against the snow, lances glinting, faces unreadable. The dagger's symbol burned in her mind, a puzzle with no answer. She whispered to the child, her voice low. "They're coming for you, little one, but I won't let them take you without knowing why." The baby's eyes met hers, dark and searching, as if she understood. Eliza gripped the rifle tighter, her resolve a fragile flame against the gathering storm of hoofbeats on the horizon. The hoofbeats thundered closer, a storm of their own making, as Eliza Harper clutched the Comanche child, her resolve a flickering flame against the unknown. By late afternoon in 1875, the Llano Estacado's snowfields glowed gold under a sinking sun, but the air was thick with tension. Eliza stood inside the trading post, the baby's warmth steadying her trembling hands, the rifle a cold weight at her side. The smoke columns had merged into a dark smear across the horizon, and now the ground shook with the approach of riders. She whispered to the girl, "They're here, little one," her voice a low growl of defiance. Whatever came next, she'd face it head on. The door creaked as she eased it open, the cold biting her face like a blade. Outside, the prairie was alive with motion. Nearly 100 Comanche warriors fanned out in a wide arc, their horses snorting clouds of steam. Bright blankets rippled in the wind, and lances gleamed like slivers of ice. Eliza's heart pounded, the rifle's stock slick under her palm. The riders' faces were stern, eyes dark as flint, but their movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. At their center sat a young chief, his buffalo robe lined with fur, a single eagle feather braided into his hair. His gaze locked on the child in her arms, and time seemed to freeze, the silence heavier than the snow. Eliza stepped onto the porch, the baby cradled tight. The chief dismounted, his boots crunching the snow, and the warriors parted, forming a crescent around the post. She recognized him, The warrior from the raid 2 years ago, the one who'd spared a child amid the chaos. His eyes, calm but piercing, held no trace of that night's violence. Instead, they carried a father's desperation, softened by relief. The baby stirred, her tiny hand clutching Eliza's shawl, and a murmur rippled through the riders. The chief raised a hand, stilling them, and took a step closer, his presence commanding yet restrained. Eliza's grip on the rifle loosened, but she kept it close. The dagger's symbol, 3 lines through a circle, flashed in her mind, its meaning still a shadow. Was it his mark? She shifted the quilt, revealing the child's face, her dark eyes mirroring the chief's. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, raw and unguarded. He spoke, his English halting but clear. "She lives because of you." The words cut through the cold, carrying a weight that silenced the wind. Eliza's throat tightened. "She reminded me of my son," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. The chief nodded, his hand touching his heart. A warrior, young and wiry, dismounted and approached, his hands open to show no threat. He placed a woven blanket at her feet, its red and black patterns stark against the snow. Others followed, each laying down offerings, pouches of sage, strips of smoked venison, a small bow carved from cedar. An elder, his face etched like the plains themselves, stepped forward asked. He held out a bone and turquoise amulet, its beads gleaming in the fading light. "For protection," he said, his voice low, like gravel underfoot. Eliza took it, her fingers brushing the smooth bone, feeling the weight of their trust. The chief extended his arms, and Eliza hesitated, her heart catching on the child's warmth. She'd held this girl through the storm, fed her, fought for her. But those eyes, now fixed on the chief, belonged to him. She stepped forward, placing the baby in his arms. He cradled her close, murmuring words in Comanche, soft as a prayer. The girl sighed, nestling against his chest, and the warriors bowed their heads, their breath rising in clouds. Eliza stood alone, the amulet heavy in her hand, the rifle forgotten. The chief looked up, his gaze steady. "You are not our enemy," he said. "You are her mother in the storm." The riders raised their hands in unison, a silent salute that echoed across the snow. Horses shifted, their hooves stirring powder, and the chief mounted, the child secure in his robe. With a final nod, he turned, leading the column away. The hoofbeats faded into the dusk, leaving only the hush of the prairie and the scent of sage. Eliza stood on the porch, the amulet's beads cool against her palm, the offerings bright at her feet. The plain stretched endlessly, but no longer empty. She'd faced the storm and found not just a child, but a bridge across a divide she'd thought uncrossable. Eliza Harper's courage on the Llano Estacado turned a storm's cry into a bridge between worlds, proving compassion can outshine fear. Her tale, etched in snow and sage, lingers like hoofbeats on the prairie. What did her choice stir in you? Was it the amulet's weight, or the chief's nod that struck deepest? Share your thoughts below. Your voice keeps this story alive. I'm grateful for every moment you've spent with Eliza's journey, riding through the blizzard with us. Until the next tale calls from the plains, stay curious and keep listening. We'll meet again where the horizon stretches wide.